Today, I want to talk to you about how to cope with your trading losses. So as a trader, trading losses are unavoidable. You are going to have them over and over and over again for as long as you are trading. Now, we all know this as traders, but dealing with your trading losses is one of the most difficult things about sitting down in front of the charts. And it's one of the things that causes people to make huge mistakes, which then snowballs and it stops them from becoming consistently profitable. So a lot of the time, when you have your trading losses, you want to do something like this. Okay, so maybe that's a little bit extreme, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all felt like that at some point when we've been trading. Now, that monitor was already broken after my uncle's dog pulled it off of my desk and smashed the screen. So how do we learn to cope with trading losses? Well, there's three things you really need to do. Now, the first one is you have to accept that you're going to have trading losses. Now, usually when I say something like that, people roll their eyes and they say, well, obviously everyone knows we're going to have losses as traders. We're dealing with uncertainty. Yeah, that's fine. But then why, when you have those losses, do you still feel absolutely terrible? You feel like you've done something wrong, you've screwed up. You get that tight feeling in your stomach and you just want the world to like collapse around you and swallow you. Why does that happen if you already know you're going to have trading losses? It's because you haven't really accepted it. And instead, what you're doing is every time you have a loss, you're blaming yourself for the loss, and then you're telling yourself, okay, as I move forward, I won't do that again. I'll be a better trader. And what you're building up in your head is this expectation that you can eliminate losses. And you might even start doing things like adjusting what you're doing with your trading. You'll adjust your stop, you'll adjust your risk, trying to tweak things so you don't have to get that horrible sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach when you have another loss. It's impossible, okay? You just have to accept it. You have to say to yourself, I'm going to have losses. Maybe I'm going to have one loss every week. Sometimes I'm going to have runs of losses. I'm going to have drawdown periods. You cannot avoid it, and it's so important that you teach yourself that it's acceptable to lose. We're taught that, when you win, you achieve things and you progress. But with trading, that is not the case. Losses are part of trading. And when you accept that, it becomes a lot easier. So one of the ways to accept that you're going to have losses is to tell yourself before you get into a trade. Tell yourself, okay, I'm now about to click to enter this trade. I know it could be a loss, but I'm happy with the entry. And if you're happy with the entry, it's a little bit easier to deal with the trading loss. So the first one, very simple, learn that you are going to have trading losses. Now, the second one is to not give yourself a reason to feel terrible. So when we have the loss and we have that feeling, I've screwed up, I've done something wrong, I shouldn't have gone into this trade. Now, one of the reasons for that is because we can jump into trades without really thinking about it. You have to make absolutely certain before you click to enter that trade that it's a good trade. It follows your trading plan, but also you're happy with the setup. You're happy to take the loss. Now, the way to do that for me is I talk through the trade to myself. Yeah, if there was a camera on the wall, people would think I'm absolutely crazy. I'm chatting away to myself in my office. There's no one else here apart from my dog, who probably wishes I would shut up, but it helps me prepare for a loss. So I say to myself, okay, so for this setup, there's A, B, C, and D going for it. It's lining up with the analysis that I had this morning. Okay, maybe there's this going against it, but with all of these confluences, I'm still happy to take this trade. I know that it could be a loss, but for me, it's a good setup. Now, what that does is a couple of things. First of all, it prepares you that if you do have a loss, you're going to be able to accept the loss because it's still a good entry, but also it makes you more selective. It's easy to put the blinkers on and just stare at the screen and think, oh, this could be a setup, let's go for it. If you start to vocalize it, you can actually start running through the good points and the bad points without allowing your mind to sort of screw itself up and just focus right in on the entry and focus in the fear of missing the trade. So you run through the good points, you run through the bad points, and you make the decision. The decision has to come with you saying, I am happy with this trade. If it's a loss, I will still be happy with the setup. Now, if you don't do that, what happens is you get to the end of the trade, and if it's a loss, you start to pick at the trade. And you start to say, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done this, it didn't have this, it didn't have this was my fault. And if you can start to apportion the blame to yourself, you start to get angry. And when you start to get angry, you start to make mistakes. You start to try and make the money back. So you have to be happy with your trade. And the way to do that is run through the setup, make sure you are okay with having a loss. Now, the third thing you need to do is have something that gets you away from the charts and breaks your focus on the charts if you have a loss. It can be all sorts of things. For me, it is simply getting up from the computer. I walk out of the office, sometimes just into the hall. Sometimes I'll go into the kitchen and I'll make a coffee, but it gets me away from the screens for maybe 5 minutes, sometimes a little bit less, because I know through experience that that is the amount of time I need to sort of mentally reset. If I don't do that and I just sit at the computer, I start to get a little bit annoyed with the loss. And I know through experience, through past experience, that that is what can cause me to start making mistakes. You all know deep inside what you're doing wrong over and over again, and you know your triggers. You know that sometimes if you have a loss and you just sit there, you start looking for setups straight away. You'll start scanning different markets and you'll justify it to yourself. And then when you do that, you tell yourself, yeah, but I won't do it again next time. It doesn't work. You have to have something that's going to almost be like a reset button. So you can come back to the charts and you can be fresh. It might take you longer than 5 minutes. It used to take me a lot longer than 5 minutes. I used to go out and walk my dog for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. Sometimes I couldn't trade until the next day. That's how bad it was for me. So if you're going through this and you're really struggling with your losses and you're making mistakes, take heart that most people, in fact all people, have gone through what you're going through. It used to be hellish for me. I used to really struggle to cope with the trading losses. But then I started to learn that if I got away from the computer, if I allowed my head to reset, I could come back, and instead of thinking about the loss, I could focus on the next setup. I could focus on finding the next perfect setup where I could talk to myself in my office and assure myself that if it was a loss, I'd be happy with the loss. Now, it can also be if you have a run of losses, you can have a longer break. You can maybe go out for a run and exhaust yourself to silence that voice in your head. Or you can just go and read a book or something. Whatever it is that works for you, you have to find a way to break that feeling of anger, sorrow, desperation to make back the money. The only way to do that, I have found, is to get away from the charts. If you start putting those things together, relatively simple, most things in trading are relatively simple, but when it comes to you actually doing them, it becomes pretty difficult. So relatively simple steps. If you start to do them regularly, you will find it will become easier to deal with your trading losses, and you won't want to do what I did with the computer monitor earlier in the video. Okay guys, so as always, I hope that was helpful. Hope it helps you guys deal with your trading losses a little bit better. Maybe you've got other coping mechanisms. If you do, you can let me know what they are, because some people might find them useful. I hope you're all having a fantastic trading week. I'm James Orr, and thank you.